Imagine the world holding its breath as a potential breakthrough in the devastating Russia-Ukraine conflict teeters on the edge, only for key players to clash over the details. That's the dramatic tension right now, as Russia's President Vladimir Putin has openly stated his nation's objections to certain elements of a US proposed roadmap to resolve the war. This declaration comes hot on the heels of discussions with American envoys in the Kremlin, sparking debates about whether true peace is within reach or just another illusion. But here's where it gets controversial. Putin's stance might reflect Russia's unyielding grip on seized lands, raising ethical questions about territorial concessions in the name of ceasefire. Let's dive into the unfolding story, breaking it down step by step to make it crystal clear, even for those new to the complexities of international diplomacy. During his conversation with India today, Putin elaborated on the Kremlin meetings, saying, "At times we said that yes, we can discuss this, but to that we can't agree." While he avoided specifying the exact areas of discord, insiders point to at least two major hurdles that continue to block progress: the status of Ukrainian regions now occupied by Russian troops, and the need for robust security assurances to protect Ukraine's future sovereignty. For beginners wondering why these points matter, think of it like negotiating a family feud. Territorial claims are about physical land and resources, while security guarantees are promises of protection, similar to an ironclad agreement ensuring no one gets hurt again. Without resolving these, any deal feels fragile, like building a house on shaky ground. Leading the U.S. delegation in Tuesday's talks was President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who is now scheduled to connect with Ukrainian negotiators in Florida. Trump himself described the discussions as reasonably good, but cautioned that outcomes depend on mutual cooperation, quipping that it does take two to tango. This metaphor highlights the delicate dance of diplomacy, where both sides must step in sync to avoid stumbling. And this is the part most people miss. Trump's involvement, as a former president, adds layers of intrigue, blending political theater with real stakes. Some see it as savvy mediation, while others question if personal agendas are at play. Before heading into a state visit to Delhi, Putin revealed in the India Today interview that Russia hadn't reviewed an updated version of the U.S. peace blueprint prior to the nearly 5-hour session with Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. "That's why we had to go over every point. That's why it took so long," Putin explained, underscoring the thoroughness required to untangle such a web of issues. He reiterated Russia's firm position that Ukrainian military forces must completely evacuate the eastern Donbass region, including zones still under Ukrainian control. Currently, Russian forces hold roughly 85% of Donbass, an industrial heartland that's been a flashpoint for years, much like how disputed borders in other global conflicts intensify tensions through economic and cultural significance. Putin bluntly stated, "Either we take back these territories by force, or eventually Ukrainian troops withdraw," painting a stark picture of the options on the table. Yuri Ushakov, Putin's top foreign policy advisor and chief negotiator, later confirmed that the Kremlin sit-down yielded no compromise on concluding the conflict. In fact, Ushakov suggested that recent Russian battlefield victories had bolstered Moscow's negotiating hand, a claim that could be seen as a strategic boast or a factual reality, depending on one's perspective. When pressed by reporters on Wednesday about whether Witkoff and Kushner sense Putin's desire for war's end, Trump affirmed that the Russian leader would like to end the war. That was their impression. Yet, not everyone shares this optimism. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha blasted Putin for wasting the world's time, while Ukraine's U.S. ambassador emphasized that Kiev won't need to wait for promises from Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky, unwavering in his stance, has flatly rejected surrendering any Ukrainian soil and demands ironclad security pledges to safeguard his nation against future threats. On Wednesday, Zelensky noted that the world clearly feels that there is a real opportunity to end the war, but stressed that talks must come with tangible pressure on Russia. Kiev and its European partners accuse Moscow of intentionally dragging out ceasefires, a tactic that prolongs suffering and raises questions about Russia's true intentions. Zelensky also shared that his negotiating team had successfully pushed for significant tweaks to the initial U.S. plan, which many viewed as overly sympathetic to Russian interests, during last week's meetings in Geneva with American representatives. A joint U.S.-Ukrainian statement announced an updated and refined peace framework, accessible here, https://www.bbc.co.uk/news/articles/C3ZWY808DPO, though details remain sparse. European negotiators, who had expressed unease about the original proposal, participated separately in the Swiss city, engaging with both Ukrainian and U.S. teams to inject their voices into the process. Adding fuel to the fire, Germany's Der Spiegel published a leaked transcript of a confidential European leaders' call on Thursday, revealing deep concerns about the US talks. French President Emmanuel Macron was reportedly wary that the US will betray Ukraine on the issue of territory without clarity on security guarantees, according to an English translation of Monday's discussion. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned Zelensky to be extremely careful in the coming days, alleging, "They playing games, both with you and with us." Finnish President Alexander Stubb chimed in, urging, "We mustn't leave Ukraine and Volodymyr alone with these guys." The BBC, which hasn't reviewed the transcript, sought responses. France's Élysée Palace countered that the president did not express himself in those terms, citing confidentiality and refusing further elaboration. Stubb declined comment, and Merz has remained silent. For its part, the BBC reached out to the White House for their take on these developments. To provide some context for newcomers, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine kicked off in February 2022, and Moscow now holds about 20% of the country's territory. In recent weeks, Russian forces have made gradual headway in southeast Ukraine, amid reports of severe casualties on both sides. This ongoing conflict underscores the human cost, with lives lost and communities shattered, making every diplomatic hiccup feel like a missed chance for resolution. But here's the controversial twist that might divide readers. Is Putin's insistence on withdrawing Ukrainian troops from Donbass a reasonable demand for a lasting peace, or a veiled attempt to legitimize conquest? And could the US, under Trump's influence, be prioritizing a quick deal over Ukraine's long-term security, as European leaders fear? What do you think? Should nations compromise on territory to stop the bloodshed, or does that reward aggression? Is Russia stalling responsibly, or playing a dangerous game? Share your opinions in the comments below. We'd love to hear differing views and spark a thoughtful discussion.